Hello everybody, it's Ollie here. We've just reached the end of Law and Order Month. 4 videos about law, justice, criminality, government surveillance, police and prisons, and it's time to have a look at some of the comments you've been leaving. So the first thing I want to say is that we had 2 episodes on Foucault, and Critias135 pointed out quite correctly that a lot of what Foucault said was actually cribbed from the Black Panthers who came before him. In particular, if you read Kwame Ture's book Stokely Speaks, a lot of the stuff in there influenced Foucault, or some of the stuff in there about politics being the continuation of war is very obviously found in Foucault. So I only learned that after I filmed the Foucault videos, but that is a very important point to bear in mind. We mentioned a hypothetical prison called the Panopticon when we were talking about government surveillance and coercion, and your second plan B mentioned something that's worth saying. In the USA today, forced labour is still very much used in prison, which is to say that the United States still, in some cases explicitly, in fact, enslaves prisoners. A lot of you might have known that already, but if you've never read anything about prison labour, in particular prison labour in the US, and the Foucault episodes interested you, that might be a topic you could enjoy. Particularly now, when there are a lot of large-scale prisoner strikes going on in the USA, I think it's quite a topical and interesting thing to look into. Talking of surveillance, Clop442 said that a lot of what we think are security cameras are actually empty shells, and is that a little bit like the Panopticon, where the prisoners don't know whether they're being watched or not? I don't know whether that's true of a lot of cameras or how many it's true of. I know it's at least true of some. I know from personal experience. My mum had something stolen in a train station once from directly under a camera and inquired about the footage and was told that it's not a camera, it's just a kind of perspex dome made to look like one. So yeah, that's absolutely like the Panopticon, because like the prisoners in the hypothetical prison, we don't know for sure we're being watched, but because the thing looks like a camera, we think there's a chance we might be, and that is enough to influence our behaviour. Although, obviously, not in the case of the person who stole my mum's laptop. ZYX Turner asked whether religion might be a little bit like a Panopticon, because God sees everything. Isn't that a kind of omnipresent surveillance? And yeah, that's quite an interesting parallel to draw. I think in the case of the Panopticon, though, the idea is the prisoners don't know that they're being watched at any particular moment, but they know they might be. Whereas in religion, I think the idea of omnipresence and omniscience is that God definitely sees everything all the time. So it's slightly different. I wonder how religion and religious believers would be different if the idea was that God isn't watching everything, but you never know. I think that's quite an interesting parallel. Mathieu Lydia said that the central chamber in the Time Lord's capital is called the Panopticon. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I haven't been back there in quite a while. I studied on Gallifrey, but I've not been back in about 500 years because the trains to get there are really expensive. And Marina Shut Up stopped by to say hello as well. Hi Marina, love your videos. Everyone go and check out Marina's channel, it's good. Then we talked about law and order and how laws are designed. And Stephen Peterson said that maybe a good test for a law is, would any reasonable person think this is okay? So like, maybe we want to decide what the speed limit is going to be in this particular area. Would every reasonable person say that 30 is enough? That's a nice idea, and there are certainly versions of ideas like that in the philosophy of law. My big question though would be, reasonable to what end? If everybody shares the same goal, then we could probably agree on what's reasonable. But say I don't really care about traffic accidents or safety and I just want to get to where I'm going as fast as possible, I might think that 30 is not a reasonable idea, or not reasonable to me. And that's the thing, is that depending on what people value or what their end goal is, different things can seem reasonable in order to get there. Now that example with the speed limits is quite a crude idea, but you can see how issues like that, people thinking very different things are reasonable depending on their values, might come up a lot if we're deciding things like tax law or pollution guidelines and environmental rules, stuff like that. Unbannable Names said that they would quite like to see a video on terrorism. You are not the only person who has requested that. I would like to do a video on terrorism. I think, particularly given recent events, it's quite relevant, and it is something I've studied, so I could talk about it. This book, Louise Richardson's "What Terrorists Want," would form a good basis of it. Yeah, I'm not going to rule it out. I think that probably has a reasonably high chance of occurring at some stage. but obviously I want to make sure that I do it right and do it justice and do it well and really read into it. So yeah, watch this space. Run It's the Cat said that in a democracy, the laws are changed by popular vote. That's the ideal, of course, but that's not really how things tend to work in practice, is it? Certainly in my country and in the USA, the laws are not made by popular vote. The power to make laws is granted by popular vote. And we hope and we try to take precautions to ensure that that election process to elect representatives who will then make the law is as fair and representative as possible. But even then, you know, there's different ways of counting votes and so on, different like proportional representation versus the electoral system we have in the UK. It's a little more complex than that. Even in the case of something like a referendum, like we had a referendum on the Brexit vote, so is that the decision being made by popular law? Yeah, kind of yes and no, because we did ended up as a nation voting to leave the EU, but the exact details of how that will work, the actual laws that will be passed to sever that ties and make the deals that will go across it and so on, that won't be voted on. That will in fact be negotiated by, well, check back with me after I know the election results and we'll find out who it's going to be done by. But do you see what I mean? Democracy doesn't necessarily mean that the laws are controlled by popular vote. In fact, often in very important cases, they're not. And hey, normally I thank my top patrons in these videos, the people who've helped me pay my rent and make the show and afford food over the last month, and I'm going to do it in a bit of a different way this time. I'm going to do the ContraPoints H Bomber Guy method of putting in some joke credits. So without further ado, I now present this month's credits. Thank you to everyone who donated this month. If you'd like to help me make the show, you can do it at patreon.com/philosophytube. And don't forget to subscribe.